Hello, I'm Mary Custard. I'm a Dean of Students at Amherst Regional. And this film, sort of like Waiting for Superman, is very one-sided in my view. It left out a lot of issues that also affect our children. But I do believe that the stress levels and the amount of work that we expect from them are just way too high. I see kids that have all these AP classes. They're on a team, so they work out for 3 hours after school. A lot of them have some home responsibilities that don't have to do with homework, or they have to go to a job because they have to help support their families because they're not rich, they're not privileged. And then they get less than 6 hours of sleep. 6 hours is a bonus. And they come to school tired every day. And they try to get there on time, but a lot of them don't make it. And they need to get there on time so that they can have breakfast at school. And it's just too much. We do overprogram our children, and we need to find a way where we can stop that.
Yes, sir.
Rob Pester. I teach math at the university, and I try to be a mathematician. I find amazing how much I agree with Barry's analysis. It is striking how our society has become so stratified and actually disparate in income and even more so wealth distribution. I also think that we saw that in the film. I mean, Lafayette, California, and I don't know, was it Westbury, New York, are two of the most affluent communities in North America. But I also wonder about the, things that aren't necessarily wealth-oriented, but just time-oriented. I remember probably as a college student, there was a program I think I heard in the Bay Area called Living on Indian Time, and it had to do with sort of ignoring the clock a lot. And of course, that sometimes makes us talk on and on and on. I'm going to be guilty of that for a minute myself. But this is a phenomenon I've seen in the last 20 or 30 years as my kid grew up and went off to school and grad school and so forth, trying to follow maybe in his dad's footsteps. I've noticed that kids these days they don't have the time to play. This is brought up somewhat in the film. The Romans called their children liberi, the free ones. I'm not sure all the kids had that, but there's one scene in the film that I thought was telling, and I wish that it had been played out more, which was the scene of child labor back in the, I don't know if it was from the 1920s or teens. And that's the sense that that was a scene, the cinematography, I thought that might be followed up on. It didn't really tie it in, but the scenes of kids tapping away on their laptops, looking pretty miserable sometimes in the classrooms, the amount of time going to Kumon or other after-school program through tutoring, just the opportunity to give kids a chance to explore, be creative. It was touched on a bit, but that seems to be a really fundamental thing. And many of my peers who were born in the 50s and 60s remember growing up as kids, essentially having lots and lots of free time, able to learn things. They didn't have organized sports. They made up their own sports that often were quite a challenge of creativity, figuring out how to make rules for baseball when you only had 3 people to play the game, and so forth. And I don't know how we go back to that, but it's certainly a challenge, and I don't know whether schools can do it. It may be something that we as parents and maybe grandparents are also going to be focusing on more in the future. So good luck to you guys who are involved professionally in training teachers. I just try to teach my students, but I hope maybe you don't have the answers, but I hope that at least this film will, if it passes around the country more, will at least give other parents at least a chance to think about whether they're doing right for their own children. So thanks.
There is in the film a series of interviews, both with teachers and students, at the Technical High School in Oakland, which is not either a privileged city in terms of its public schools, nor is that school itself so. And it's interesting to me, the filmmaker puts it in, and obviously it's a choice she makes to put it in without any clue to those of us who might not know that how different it is from those two of the, indeed, of the richest communities in America. And I do think that one of the things that the film doesn't work at, and this is to pick up what Nick has to say about Springfield. I work in the Springfield schools with public school teachers there and have for over 10 years. And you could say that the difference between public schools of privilege in the United States and public schools of non-privilege is that in public schools of non-privilege, there is a reasonable amount of free time. And in schools of privilege, you have what the film stresses so much. That is to say that this is a film primarily about a dilemma which afflicts the children of the elite. And that in other schools, boredom and free time are a major issue. It's not that there aren't pressures on the lives of kids in Springfield or Holyoke. There certainly are pressures of all kinds, but they're not these pressures, usually, with the exception of those kids whose parents get them into the performing arts school or a particular charter school that works for them. So there are exceptions. But the public schools themselves have very, very different ambiances. And this film really doesn't give you that in a substantial and useful way, or does not really explore it. That is to say, we compete at the top for fewer and fewer spaces, while we deny opportunity to larger and larger numbers of kids. That's really what I was saying.
Thank you. My name is Rob Hirschfeld, and I'm the rector of one of the churches around the corner at Grace Church. Just as a member of the clergy, I'm struck by how much pressure is levied on the kids that I see in this religious community. My own son is, he's in an Ivy League school, first year, did all the AP stuff. I think despite me, because I was very concerned that he would sort of go through the same track that I did, which was just not having any fun, becoming an alcoholic at a very young age, quite anxious about all that. What I noticed about what I remember about Willie's high school career, which was by all measures, superb. The course that he really enjoyed the most, I think, that he got the most out of, was his woodworking class. And I'm interested in some of the, but Barry, you mentioned just like the opportunities that are before us that we don't see. This measure of happiness. I wonder what's happened to the trades, and seeing the trades as something that is worthwhile, that has dignity. When the transmission dropped in my Jetta recently, and I had to talk to an auto recycler, I swear that guy was the happiest guy I'd met around. I mean, he's professional, he's making money, much more than I am, I think. There's a sense of purpose to his life. I can't find a plumber. Does anyone know where they can get a good plumber? It's interesting, I just read in the New York Times this morning that GE is going back to what it used to do, which is making things. I'm just interested in how that, the mention of the technical school, without really understanding what goes on in the technical school, was interesting to me. So, thank you.
Okay. This gentleman, and then Sonia.
Well, just to help you a little bit with that, I'm coordinator of guidance services at a technical school.
Okay.
Okay. And this is a great thing that you bring up, because at the end of this movie, all we have is like a little line that one thing you should check into is technical schools, right? Number one, the biggest thing is we have to change our mindset around technical schools and the trades, right? Because that is something everybody can leave here and do, right? you know, if your child came to you in 8th grade or 9th, well, actually around here it would have to be in 8th grade, and said, I want to be a carpenter, a lot of people, oh my God, no, don't be a carpenter. What are you talking about, right? You're talking about this love of woodworking, right? Right? So, number one, that's something that you want to try to stimulate in your children, to explore all kinds of different ideas, including technical ideas, but also educate yourself. If you live around here, go to Smith and find out what people do. I had a student of mine that graduated in 2001, and I'm certain he wouldn't mind me telling this. He graduated with a 2.1 GPA, because the beginning of high school was a complete wipeout. But he got into our culinary arts program. His father had a business, and he'd worked with his father, and he loved it. And right now he buys all the equipment for all the Pizzeria Uno franchises all over the U.S. And he graduated from Johnson Wales University on the dean's list every trimester. Right? And tech ed is totally different. If you fix cars today, if you work at Belize Chevrolet or any of the dealerships, and you go to Mass Bay College where they can train you to fix BMWs, in the middle of your 20s, you could be making $60,000, $70,000 a year. Right?
And another 60 bootlegging. Fixing people's cars in the garage.
I could talk about this all night long, but here's where our priorities are. For 2 times in the last 10 years, we have tried to initiate a program where we get students into precision manufacturing. If you wonder if we still make things, next time you see a commercial airplane, $100,000 of that commercial airplane, part-wise, comes from Western Massachusetts. Now, in 2001, actually 2000, we tried this in partnership with the Western Mass Precision Institute, which was a school in West Springfield. We had set up this idea of sending students to this school to learn about precision manufacturing. When 9/11 happened, they lost $250,000 of their funding. Right? 3 years ago, we brought this idea back up. At that point in time, there were 90 jobs in Pioneer Valley that went unfilled in precision manufacturing. We make things in this country. We make parts for nuclear power plants, for automobiles, you name it. Right? When the financial crisis hit, we lost the $75,000 of funding that we had, with Smith & Wesson and Hamilton Sundstrand at the table. Right? And nobody has seemed to think, we're going to try it again, but between that time and now, nobody seemed to think that was a problem. Right? These jobs were there. Talk about stimulating the economy. Right? So parents have to think differently. Guidance counselors have to think differently. Right? If there's somebody who's a somewhat strong academic student in some areas and not in others, talk about all different kinds of careers, not just you're going to go to college, you're going to go to college, you're going to go to college. Right?
Thank you.